Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist / secular / awesome community. This is episode number 123, and we're recording live on December 14th, 2017. I got the year right this time. Thanks, Susie. So I would quickly like to thank last week's guests. The triumphant return of Bill and Susie Robbins. Do check out Barroom Atheist, recording bi-weekly. This week's guests, and so far we have one we might get to later, asked for this. There's this dark place in the world that might actually be this world. It might be reality, and it might be the product of a sick imagination. It's the void, and that's where tonight's guests, Aaron and GW, reside. Tonight, we will enter the void. And now GW and Aaron are the two hosts of Embrace the Void. Sadly, GW is not here currently, but he may show up during the show. So since Aaron's the only guest here tonight, I am going to do my out-of-context quotes for him, although I only have one. My woodar goes off very quickly. Yep. So welcome to the show, Aaron.
That was in response probably to quantum physics of some sort?
It was definitely a quantum... Mm-hmm. It's where the word quantum then goes into things that you can't possibly define anyway.
Quantum entanglebangs.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Deep Rock has been talking to you, huh?
That's right. I totally dig on the... No, it's terrible. Apologies for GW. He's currently tied up with a student situation. He's a teacher as well, so he'll hopefully be along as soon as he possibly can. And in the meantime, I will do my best to entertain for the both of us.
And since Aaron is classing up the joint over at Serious Inquiries only this week, I promise to make this show a little more ragged. So I have my whiskey barrel stout from Boulevard in my current glass. And in case that doesn't do it, I got Boulevard's Tough Kitty Milk Stout.
There you go.
Kind of a desserty beer, but it's it's nice, a little bit lighter than my usual super harsh. What do you got? What are you drinking there?
Well, so you got what you got a normal liquid bread. Oh, excuse me, a normal liquid bread, and then a sweet bread is what you're telling me going on there.
Mm-hmm.
I've got just some Caribbean rum and various juices going on over here. Just a little bit of a refreshing taste. I'm coming off a cold, so I wasn't like feeling something stronger than that at the moment.
It seems pretty strong by itself. So what is the mythical or non-mythical meet cute that had you two get together to first meet each other and then agree, you know what, let's spend some of our precious non-infinite time as conscious beings working on a podcast?
Yeah, GW and I first met at a hippie arts commune summer camp for children that I grew up at as a camper, and he went to as a counselor, and we worked together at the same time. And we worked there for a few years and then have been in touch since he stopped working there. And he came to me a little bit, maybe a year or so ago at this point, I guess, getting on, when we were both listening to stuff like Serious Inquiries a bunch. And he was like, we should put together some sort of podcast. And we started batting around ideas some because it seemed like a fun idea. And because my background is philosophy, we... headed in that direction, but didn't want to necessarily do like another sort of run-of-the-mill philosophy Sam Harris knockoff. So I had been doing a bunch of political and philosophical commentary on Facebook around that time, having to do with the horrible election that was happening. So it all kind of came together to create Embrace the Void, which was a show about living in this horrible world and figuring out how to come together and be happy and survive within this worst timeline.
So what do you refer to as, if someone asks you, when you say embrace the void, what is the void?
Yeah.
Have you already just described it before I asked the question?
No, I mean, there's lots of answers to that, right? The void is all the things that create in us any sort of suffering or existential angst. So anything from, the vast emptiness of space, to the gap between human beings, to the gap between what we currently know and what we need to know if we're going to be happy. Like all of these ways in which we are, as the Buddha would say, born to suffering. So Uh, it's about recognizing what you know, like what the Greeks would call the pathos, like the dark sides of things, and accepting that those things exist, and then helping people to develop philosophical perspectives that allow them to not fall into total nihilism while dealing with those issues.
Well, you're relatively a relatively young podcast. I mean, 22 episodes, last check. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe this isn't the right question to ask since you're still relatively, you got that honeymoon phase going on. But how do you think the show has changed from when you kind of started to where you are, now? Because you've at least been in it a few months, so you got a
Yeah.
bit of a feel and a flow for it.
Yeah, we've been getting some really good feedback from the community, and that's been helping sort of shape the podcast as we go along. So we've been getting sort of gently nudged towards doing a little bit more of the philosophical deep dives because there's a lot of love for that, it turns out, and a little bit away from political analysis because there's already quite a bit of that running around, though we still include some because obviously it's part of our essence. The Trump stuff can't be ignored, right? The impeachment stuff can't be ignored, the harassment stuff, all of that is our bread and butter, but we then try to mirror it together with some useful philosophical advice and analysis. So we've sort of developed in that way, and we've been trying to work out the blend of light and dark that when you do a work like this, it can't be all darkness. We're not trying to drive people to suicide or anything like that. We're actually very for trying to help people. So there's a mix of how far down do you dive, and then like how do you bring people back up again and help them feel good about moving forward. So it's been working out the balancing of that. I think in the coming year, there's going to be a little bit more like trying to factor in a little bit of the optimism to go with because I think we've pretty much established our credibility as comfortable talking about the darkest of all possible things.
That's very true.
Mm-mm.
But it's funny that you mentioned, like philosophy. Oh, there's tons of philosophy podcasts. Well, I know there's tons of everything podcasts, but I don't really listen to any philosophy podcasts. Like you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
Sam Harris. I don't know. Sometimes I just can't go where he's going with some of his thoughts and arguments. And I think I tried to read his latest book, and just I think I was trying to read on the beach, and just wasn't really what we call a beachy read.
Yeah, and even the stuff that's philosophy that's for reading is challenging to read. And then I listen to Sam Harris when people tell me to for specific episodes, for specific need. I have some issues with I have a lot of issues with his social views on a variety of things having to do with I think he has a lot of blind spots for any current events kind of issues. I think he's a little better when he does Buddhism, and he's not so great when he does meta ethics. Those are just my sort of takes on that particular individual. But I think you're right that there are a lot of philosophy podcasts, but a lot of them kind of run together in some ways. I think Very Bad Wizards is actually my favorite, separate from ours, of course. But they do a really good job of taking issues and making them interesting and having a fun discussion about them. So I would point people in that direction if they're interested.
I was trying to remember if I listened to them, there's like a takedown of, it might have been the Google like memo thing.
Yeah, they
I'm
tend a
trying to
little
remember.
towards.
I mean, they had him on the show. No, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. It's like
You're thinking of
which right wing
the hoax,
crazy person who's
the Phoenix hoax. They had
oh gosh, I forgot
Lindsay on
about
there,
the
and
what was it called? The something penis,
the conceptual
the
penis.
conceptual penis. What a just a shit show that was. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and they had Lindsay on, and they pretty well took him apart, and it was a great episode. They've also been on Sam Harris's show, so yeah, they're great. And then yeah, it's been really fun jumping into this community and finding out about all these people. I'm still learning all the personalities and sorting everything out. Like you said, we're pretty young still.
Yeah, so are you two you located in the same part of the country? Where are you?
No, I'm Brooklyn, and he's way over. He's in Wisconsin right now,
Hmm.
and has also been on West Coast some. So he moves around a bit for work. Um, but right now he's in Wisconsin. We're both sort of freelance theater slash teaching. He's a sound theater person. I'm a lighting theater person, and I also do directing, and then I teach philosophy. So there's a lot of stuff.
So it's possible there could be Embrace the Void, the play
There could be Embrace the
coming
Void.
to us soon.
I have a really great friend who's a master puppeteer named Cameron Garrity, and one day I will have him write and produce me a Void puppet musical, and it will be something. It will be worth a billionaire Patreon money.
We should all have a puppet musical in us. I think it's
Oh, man.
there.
It'll be like the end of Forgetting Sarah Marshall or something, whatever it is. It'll be the vampire puppet musical, only it's going to be just so many more tentacles.
So many more. So what's I mean, I listened to the first couple episodes and the latest episode. Do you have like a standard format to your show? Like, do you have a standard kind of
Sort of.
each episode is this long, or is it kind of fluctuate?
Yeah, we're about an hour show, and we were every other week, but starting in January, we're going to go to every week because we dealing with all the Patreon stuff and like the chaos with that, and then at the same time, we've been getting a lot of requests for more episodes, so we're shifting over to the once a week format. And we'll do still about an hour a week where we open up with a opening invocation that is either written by me or one of the fans that's something related, something weird and philosophical or nerdy or something. And that leads into a little bit of, business, politics, cleaning up discussions. And then we usually have a lengthy deep dive B segment where we talk about a philosophical position or a philosophical issue, or it ranges. There's a lot of topics that we try to get to, a lot of void feminism. And then we usually do a hero of the week at the end where we single out an individual who has particularly contributed to the voidiness of the world in some way or another. And then, yeah, that's pretty much the shtick.
So the hero is kind of a negative thing then?
It has been. We're considering retooling that a little bit in the new year to bring a little bit more positivity to the end of the episode. So stay tuned and see how that goes.
Yeah, sometimes in the world, it's like, oh, I do need to include something positive. You're right. I mean,
Yeah.
the negativity can be strong and can be hard to fend off. So you need to say, hey, we're doing good stuff.
Usually the opening segment with the politics is pretty dark, and then the philosophy is a little bit of mixed, and then I think we'll move towards ending with a little bit of something a little lighter, right? Can we? This is a adult age show.
You can curse, yeah.
All right.
Fucking curse if you fucking won.
Great.
I usually let my guest lead, but I'll do it this time.
I wanted to compare it to one of my heroes, Bill Hicks, who would talk about how halfway through all of his like really serious Lenny Bruce style, here's the way the government is fucking you over kind of news comedy, he would say, all right, I know I'm losing some of you, but stick with me. At the end of this, we're going to pull our parachutes and we're going to parachute down to Dick Joke Island. And we're all going to like enjoy a bunch of really fun dick jokes to like make up for the fact that we all had this really serious conversation. And I respect that model. I think that John Oliver does that model. Jon Stewart did that model. Like it allows one to dive into the pathos and then come out at the end not feeling completely exhausted. Maybe.
I don't blame you for that. So, and now you've done some interviews during your show. Do you have like a favorite guest or someone that maybe was like not quite what you expected, but in a good way?
Oh, I mean, I love all my guests equally. They've all been great. It's I don't know. There hasn't been anyone that's like totally surprised me one way or another. I had a really fun time with Abe, who was one of our more recent interviews, who was a person I met online, who was a former fan of Carl Sargon of Akkad, and he has since sort of blue pilled himself back into normalcy and has pulled some other people back with him from that Gamergate kind of world, and that was a very interesting conversation. We've had a really nice sort of series about issues plaguing the skeptical movement and the atheist movement and we've included people like Jeremiah Traeger and Natalie Newell, who were great for an episode on scientism, talking about the issues of over fixation on traditional classical modern philosophy and like hyper rationalist style philosophy at the cost of human understanding. And then like we had a really great episode with Thomas Smith, who trades off with us on Serious Inquiries, obviously. And we talked about toxic masculinity, which is a really personal topic for me. Like, if there's an issue that I care most about philosophically as an applied ethics kind of person, it's how to help women deal with the current situation of sexual harassment and how to reform our society so that women are not currently being essentially stolen from by men acting inappropriately towards them. So that was
it's such a tough time in the society, because I feel like we're just in the part where it's like we're coming to self-realization of, oh, things are pretty bad. Oh, there's a lot of people who just, their daily lives, they're looking over their shoulder every step they take. And this only happens occasionally. Like, I was thinking, I'm wearing a Black Non-Believers shirt right now. And like, if I wore that just going to like work, I'd be like, ooh, I don't know about that. Now, if I wear it at an atheist conference, I'll be like, okay, I fit in. But that's like 1/1000th of what, a lot of people deal with just existing. And it takes a second to realize that and go, well, how do we get society in a better place? And how do we at least acknowledge people when they say these things happen, and not go, I don't believe you. And I go, oh, I think you probably are telling a true story, and let's move on.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting debate online. And like, I shouldn't call it, it's been a really important debate about a really serious situation where we have to revise our understanding of believing women. And I say women because that's 90%, believing victims. Where like the pushback I immediately get if I say I believe women is innocent until proven guilty. Like, you can't just assume that every accusation is 100% correct. Like, that's going to lead to chaos or something, right? So what we really mean when we say believing women, and this is where philosophy comes in and trying to disentangle concepts, is that we replace our old view, which was like, we approach these as unbelievable, right? We don't think that when women say they're harassed on a daily basis, we view that with skepticism, or we view their constant like experiences of harassment with skepticism, or their specific accusations of harassment with skepticism. And we replace that with the view that we take these stories seriously, like you were saying. Like, when someone shows up to a police department and says, I want to file charges about harassment, or when they show up to their business's HR department and says, I want to file charges about harassment, the response shouldn't be, it wasn't what you think it was. Don't worry about this. Just stay away from him, right? That was the old way of doing it. And we need to move towards a system where it's like, we're going to take this seriously. We're going to find out what happened, and we're going to address it in a way that doesn't harm the person who was already harmed by the behavior.
And we also don't want to have this. It doesn't happen very often, but like sometimes when people are just new to like the atheist skeptic community, they get this elevated sense of like not just themselves, but the community itself, and go, well, we're above all this stuff in the world. And then you hear about people at conferences and experiences they've had with well-known names. We don't need to even go there. Listen to a lot of shows, you'll figure out who that is, and you go, oh,
who are tweeting
the issues exist.
About Me Too.
The issues exist kind of universally, and if we as atheists think we're like above the social issues of the world, just say the name Scott and Jennifer Smith a couple weeks ago, and we kind of it pretty much says we aren't automatically above this. And taking this seriously and trying to acknowledge issues and then go, well, there's got to be a better way. Almost like, you talk about the void being this bad place. It's like, oh gosh, there's got to be a better setup than we have now. Like, anything would be better.
Yep.
The opposite to the conservative, like, the suburban 50s for white people, that was great. That kind of thing. It's like, yeah, but that's just for a very narrow population, and it's actually didn't really happen. But never mind. Okay, we'll lighten it a little bit. So, first of all, do you drink during recording? Doesn't sound like it. You guys sound very smart and stuff. And do you recommend that people drink or imbibe as long as they're not driving while listening to your show?
I recommend that everyone do the correct amount of substances for them in order to enjoy the experiences in the way that feel most proper to them. I imbibe substances when I podcast.
I like that.
Yeah.
Do you inhale during your podcast?
Yes. I engage in things. I can't leave it any more than that because I teach and I don't want to, not teach. So what I will say is philosophy of mind involves studying mental states.
Nice. So, okay, we can't, you can't play favorites. You can't tell me who your favorite kid is and all that when it comes to your guests, but you can tell me if you have some dream guests that you'd like to have on your show.
Oh, sure. Oh, looks like GW might be here soon. That's nice. The guys from Very Bad Wizards, I would love to have on my show at some point. I'm hoping to potentially have Eli Bosnick on the show at some point soon to talk about depression.
That's right. He's in New York, right?
The guys from Pod Save America or Parit Barara would be another great one. Like the political heavy hitters who I get to listen to on a daily, on a weekly basis and love. It'd be great to have them on. Anna Marie Cox would be another one. Pulling in people like that. Philosophically, I'm not sure. Aside from the Very Bad Wizard guys, who I really want, who I need to bring in philosophically on things. I'm sure someone will come up eventually, though.
Well, what would it be like for you? Just saying, in a theoretical world, let's say Sam Harris agrees to be on your show. That's such a powder keg in the atheist community. There's some people who've just blown him off, I'm never going to deal with him again, and people who not quite Jordan Peterson worship, but kind of are on that side where he can say no wrong. Would you think of it in those terms, or would you be like, oh, this would be great just to chat with him?
You're talking about Sam Harris?
Yeah.
I would be willing to have a conversation with Sam Harris if he was okay with me bringing up that I believe he has blind spots about social issues. He, for example, retweeted an article that was called "The Warlock Hunt," that was about how the current cultural situation with sexual harassment is not healthy and we need to back off of this. And it was written by a woman, and I think it had a lot of major problems. And I retweeted him what I thought was a better article about how the nature of this abuse is about more than just sexuality. It's about the systemic prevention of women from being able to compete equally in work environments by men who are protected in using harassment as a weapon to challenge those women's capacities. So I would want to talk to him about stuff like that and maybe some Black Lives Matter stuff. But I think that he and I could have a lot of agreement about normative ethics and pluralism. And I think that we could have a really interesting discussion about the nature of meta ethics and what science can actually prove versus not prove when it comes to ethical theories.
Yeah, I feel like you could definitely have a better conversation with him than I would.
I mean, to be fair, I've been working on this stuff for a while. It's a weird thing because it's when you're an ethics philosophy professor, what you're sort of going to have to say is, I'm an expert at thinking about doing the right thing compared to other people. But everybody thinks that they have some background in thinking about doing the right thing. So it's how do you gently say, look, I've been thinking about doing the right thing a little harder than you guys for a while.
So if a Christian pulls that you're an atheist, where do your morals come from kind of question, do I pretty much say, okay, the next 30 minutes of the show are shut down, you got plenty to say here?
Oh, I mean, I could I could tear them apart if that's what you really want to spend the rest of the time with. I could explain to you first why divine command theory is worse than anything that an atheist can put forward in the realm of metaethics, and then I can explain to you a functional metaethics for atheists.
What are metaethics?
So
To get us started, we're going to do a one-on-one here before we get anywhere deeper.
Yeah, no. So like there are three levels of ethics in a sense, sort of. Like there's a useful distinction of ethics into three parts. Applied ethics is the lowest level, which is like, how do I reduce suffering in this particular part of the world that has this particular issue having to do with malnutrition or something like that. Okay, that's like really on the ground kind of ethics. And then you have normative ethics, which is like utilitarianism, where it says ethics is doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people, maximizing happiness for as many people as possible. Or deontology, which says ethics is respecting everyone's autonomy and not, making some people slaves to benefit the lives of others. Okay? So far, so good?
So not net neutrality?
Yeah, not gender neutrality. And then like metaethics is what is the nature of ethical claims and truths, and where do they come from, and are they real or are we making them up, and like this is all pretend. Like that, those are metaethical questions. So like, are there objective moral truths separate from what we believe in them? That'd be an important metaethical question. And so
I feel like you wouldn't be on the side of objective moral truths, but I've only listened to you on a podcast for like 2 hours, so you're probably wrong.
Yeah, I'm 100% on the side of objective moral truths. I'm what's called a moral realist, which means that I believe that moral truths are as real as truths about the physical world, for example. Which puts me in contrast with people who think, morality is just a system that humans make up to make themselves act better, for example. Does that make sense?
I sometimes wonder about that because like, what does society accept? And like 50 years later, it definitely shifts a lot. And is there really a universal thing behind that? And I don't know. It's like eventually we're going to get there. Are we doing what's the scientific theory where you get half closer, you don't never get there? Is that us? In terms of morals, like we're getting closer to being a better society. We're just maybe never going to get to whatever utopia is.
Well, like think about scientific advancement, right? Human beings are individually not very bright and not very good at being objective about their information or their data, right? So we invented the scientific method.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You, me, everyone, right? I'm not any better than you are, even though I've been studying philosophy. Like it doesn't make me any better at distinguishing good data from bad data on small scales. We still need the scientific method and repeatability and testability, all these ideas. And what that does is it allows us to accrue knowledge over time, right? One individual is never going to be brilliant. Or like, some individuals will be brilliant, but like every individual is never going to be brilliant. But we can build up, as a species, knowledge by having a system that tests knowledge, weeds out the bad knowledge, and replaces it with better knowledge, right? So that works for particle physics, and we know it works because we have rocket ships now. We didn't used to have rocket ships. So far, so good?
Flat Earth? No, just kidding.
Yes. Well, okay. There's always going to be a minority report, right? There's no way around that problem. So my view is morality works the same way, right? We now know that slavery is wrong. We didn't used to know that. We thought it was okay.
That's very true.
We were wrong about that. We were very, very wrong about that, objectively so. And there's no, any society that thinks that it's right about slavery being okay is actually right. That's wrong. We figured out that's wrong, right? So that's why I'm a moral realist, is because I think that, like, separate from any question of persuasion or where morality comes from, it's objectively true that it's wrong to do X kinds of things to conscious beings, and you shouldn't do any of those things no matter what. Okay? And then from there, we can have a long discussion about what are the kinds of lifestyles that are okay for a conscious being, what makes them happy versus unhappy, and like science can then come in and help us by telling us if you let people do these kinds of behaviors, they'll have this much happiness versus that much happiness. And like we can decide from those behaviors and choose a bunch of different lifestyles, and we can all try it out and see what happens. And that's all great.
Yeah, and in short, beer makes us happy and science makes better beer. So I like this.
Exactly, right? You should be allowed to drink because the puritanical nonsense about why God doesn't want you to drink is stupid, right? Divine command theory is stupid because
Some gods do want you to, although I think Christianity is like, the whole wine blood thing. They seem to be okay with it. But before that,
they're inconsistent about it is the
the
problem.
Mormon church was definitely don't drink, even though their founder was definitely drinking, and Islam, their founder, I believe, drank, and they said don't drink. Interesting. But yeah, there's definitely that God
Right.
tells you to do it thing that I feel like we're past, but we're not past.
Right.
We're way not.
There are so many problems with the God tells you to do it thing, right? Because here's the main problem. The meta-ethical problem is if God says killing children for fun is good, right? The question arises, is it good because God has decided that it's good, or is God wrong about that? Okay? If God can't be wrong about that, then God is a autocratic dictator who can make torture and pedophilia and whatever moral just by saying it's moral. And if that's the kind of God that their people have in mind, I don't want to worship or believe in that God, and I think its morality is terrible, and I'm not going to agree with it. If God is the sort of thing where it can't make, baby torture morally acceptable because it is constrained by the moral truths that are superior even to it, then God is not the source of morality, and any religion that says God is the source of morality is wrong.
And boom, he just did that. So in your show, the concept of the void,
Mm-hmm.
do you actually think we're currently living in the worst possible timeline?
I have taken up that position as a rhetorical device for the purposes of the show. Ironically enough, I am an optimist. I can't kill it, I can't burn it out no matter how much I try, no matter how much time I spend around horrible alt-right trolls and other people on the internet. I still end up like believing more optimistic things. I don't know how to stop it. So I think we are in a very dark point in this timeline. And I think we are in a timeline where suffering is pretty persistent. And I think that ignoring those things is problematic. And I don't, I think that we're in the absolute worst of all possible timelines is a sort of absurdly extreme position that I will happily argue for the sake of amusement. But really, I think that we just need to approach our timeline knowing how complicated and problematic it is right now.
And that things did seem good for a while, and now they don't seem good. And it's possible there could be a U-turn.
Yeah.
Now, you talking? You go.
No. We like to think that the arc of history it bends towards justice, and we forget the part where it says it's long and it bends towards justice.
Yeah.
And that the reason it's long is because sometimes there's some backsliding.
Yeah, if you study history at all, you know that it's like sometimes things don't. Yeah, it's not a straight line up, unless you're Al Gore and climate change, but it's different. Different subject. We're not going into that. So now, in the atheist slash
I get some weird feedback from you.
Skeptic world, we all have one blank guest.
Hang on, I'm having some trouble understanding you.
Oh, really? Do I need to get closer to the mic? How you doing? Any luck?
It's picking up a little bit now.
Pick it up a little bit. Well, I was saying in the atheist community
for a second.
In the atheist community, like we have one guest of a certain subject. Like we all know one ex-Muslim, some cases one feminist, one guest of color. Have you become the atheist community go-to philosopher?
I would love to. No, it's a horrible idea. I think there should be many, many philosophers within the atheist community. I think all the guys who do Scathing Atheist are philosophers. I think Thomas Smith is himself a philosopher. I think I bring some useful ways of discussing things to the table as
I was
everyone
like,
else
you know
does.
what you're talking about. Those guys, make jokes. Come on. I mean, Thomas. No, but the jokes.
I
But
mean, a lot of them like have. I mean, like I would like to help fill a niche for people who really are like, we need someone who has the terminology and the length of deep dives within each of these. Like, to me, philosophy is like chess. You know how you when you play chess or whatever, you learn the openings of the game. You learn this move gives you this move, gives you this move, out to 20 moves or something like that. Okay, studying philosophy is partly like that. Partly it's about just learning creative, critical thinking skills, and partly it's about saying, within this particular field, here are the 5 main openings, here are the 5 main responses, and here are the 20 variants that come with those 5 main openings and responses. And like, I'm happy to be the person who can do as best as I can to say, here are the various openings and responses as I understand them, and here is what I think is the best way to run your way down this argument. So I'm happy to do that. I'm not perfect. I'm young, and I am, while overeducated, I do not have a PhD. So I am always at pains to make clear that I am a Bill Nye-ish kind of philosopher, I guess. But it's fun, and I love doing it, and I like helping people try to understand things.
yeah, see, I don't have that one thing. Like you're talking about the hook on your show. Like I'm like, I don't have that hook, unless you want to say I'm the guy who knows about beer in the atheist community. But it's like saying I'm the guy who knows about beards in the atheist community. I think we got a few opportunities.
Well,
Now, as our go-to philosopher,
yeah.
who are some of your baller philosophers?
Oh, I love Hume. I love the skeptics, generally speaking. So that's Hume, Socrates, Spinoza. I love um, of the modern philosophers. I love people like Thomas Nagel. I think he has a lot to bring to the table. I love John Rawls and John Stuart Mill. But I'm happy to help you work on your thing. So, like, you do a lot of these interviews, right? You interview people on a regular, and it seems like you pull in a lot of people consistently for interviews, like, as far as I can tell. So there's got to be a hook in that, right? Like, there's got to be a way to be the hub that pulls people into the atheist community and talks about atheist issues and promotes communal interaction.
Well, here's what I like to do. I like to introduce people to podcasts that are probably better than mine and say, listen to that, but then they might go that way. But that's okay because I like listening to podcasts, and I think you always need new podcast blood, as it were. So that's, yeah. And the thing is, so I used to do fantasy football interviews. I had the kind of big question I always asked, what do you think about more, football or sex? And that question always had some interesting answers, but I don't have that. Like, what do you think about more, sex or Jesus, or sex or, God? Or I don't have that question yet on the atheist side. So it's kind of whatever,
Yeah.
whatever the guest has that I can pull out of them.
I guess because I'm a social justice warrior, my initial instinct is to move away from any binary that involves sex as the sort of the gold standard of how much time I spend on something. Not to say that I don't love sex, which I really very much do, but I don't know. Maybe you can find a new skeptical version of that sort of cleaves the skeptical community in interesting ways, and bring that to the table.
Well, we do have a lot of binaries and we try to create these binaries. I think it's like Democrat but Republican. Like people don't necessarily think that way. SJW, non-SJW. I think of atheist like podcasters as in terms of like the early bird special, which is like me, like the original. I had a potential guest this week, and it was like, hey, let's start at 10 o'clock. I'm like, yeah, maybe not. So there's the early bird special, and there's the late people. I've been on shows where it's like, hey, we start at 11:30 on Friday. I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm gonna be awake. So we have these splits in the community that have nothing to do with social issues. They're just like, I get tired.
Well, like there's the whole YouTube versus podcasters, it seems like.
I guess in theory I'm both, because I started YouTube and I do podcasts as well. But yeah, when you say YouTube atheism, it's not a positive connotation. You know, you think of, I like to say Carl. I don't like to say his official name because I think it's like pretentious. And as I think I mentioned to you in GW as I was chatting, I was like, how come people who have a British accent just automatically get thought of as like they're brilliant? Like if Carl
I wouldn't ask you to call me
Milo
Mr. Void or something like
didn't
that.
have that accent, no one would be listening to them. So they're saying the same crap that 100 people who haven't taken 10 seconds to think about what they're talking about say. But for some reason they have that accent. Everybody's like, ooh, I think that's smart. You know, like we do think of British as smart, and we can even go into the whole why do the Star Wars characters have British accents sometimes, you know, and that makes them seem smarter.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. It's a trigger for some people, I guess. It brings up for them colonial ideals. Like, I don't know. It doesn't do anything for me. It's like listening to him as nails on a chalkboard for me, because it's so poorly thought through, and like the accent does nothing to soothe the poorly done reasoning. So
Yeah, is that a frustration? I don't know if you're a big like sci-fi guy, but it seems like in terms of science fiction and movies, it's always kind of surface level. But when you like read science fiction, you can get into the deeper kind of concepts that probably actually like, you know, get your brain excited.
yeah, well, I love sci-fi because it's really just long-form philosophical thought experiments. It's most of the good sci-fi is a critique of one philosophical position or another, done to some sort of where some particular thing, some dial is turned up to 11, so that we can observe the philosophical implications of that heightened situation.
So do you think?
Brave New World, for example?
Oh, that's right. You two talked about the movie Arrival, and now I'm like, oh, I need to watch that because I haven't seen it yet. It sounds like the two of you really like that.
That's a good one.
Because to do, yeah, the kind of alien thing in a different way that, you know, it sounds good. But maybe I'll, you know, that'll be like next episode. I'll you know, watch the movie and we can chat about that. We can mess with the what is it, Lot Awful movies. Oh yeah, we got your movies right here.
Yeah.
So do you think?
Yeah, Arrival's a good one.
Philosophy, you know, do you think there's an inherent balance to the universe? I mean, we were happy a few days ago because Doug Jones, you know, got elected in Alabama, but now today we learned that the internet's probably going away. So what does that say?
I don't think the universe cares at all. I think the human mind will normalize any situation for the most part, even really, really horrible situations. It seems like there's an evolved adaptive advantage in taking even a really gruesome situation and making it psychologically manageable that seems to pervade the human species. But I don't think like the universe has any cosmic desire to balance out good and evil in any sort of way. I don't think it cares one way or another.
Well, gosh, that sounds like reality. So do you have some favorite?
Not in a bad way either.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's good. There's good news and bad news in the fact that the universe doesn't care. Like the universe isn't meddling with you. It isn't trying to like conform you to some ridiculous giant cosmic plan or some nonsense.
Well, I had a question for Jeannie, my one chat room guest, and she wanted to know about some of your favorite sci-fi authors, or maybe your favorite, some of the books that really have do it for you.
Yeah. So in no particular order, Brave New World by Huxley, Dune by Frank Herbert, Stranger in a Strange Land, Heinlein. Let's see. You know, the Bean part of the Orson Scott Card Ender's Game series is really wonderful. What else? Vonnegut, Sirens of Titan kind of things. Philip K. Dick, everything by Philip K. Dick ever. All of that is essential reading as far as I'm concerned.
So have you watched that Amazon show? That damn, I can't remember the book name, but the one where the Nazis win.
Man in a High Castle.
Yeah, because
I
obviously
watched
the book wasn't that, but
Yeah, the book is like a short novella, and it has a sort of non-ending, as a lot of the Philip K. Dick stories tend to. But it has some really interesting thoughts in it. The show was beautiful, but suffered for me from the pacing issues that much of prestige television currently suffers from, where it's like super pretty. It's the Carnival style of theater, to be honest. It's really pretty and wonderful, but just like slow and a lot of characters who I don't want to really have a lot of feelings for,
yeah.
and like it's hard to move through it in some ways. So like that's been an issue with a lot of the online television. I think it's been very hit and miss. I'm interested to see how Amazon does with their Philip K. Dick miniseries that's coming out. They're doing a short story series where it's like going to be kind of Black Mirror, I think, where it's going to be a bunch of Philip K. Dick esque short stories. Um, I'll be curious to see if that's good or not.
Did you ever watch the TV show Fringe?
I did. I watched like the first season and a half, 2 seasons, and then I just didn't have access to it and lost track of it. I enjoyed it. I like the parallel worlds kind of stuff that was going on there, obviously, because that's a big thing for me. Um, oh, I should add The Invisibles and Transmetropolitan. Those are graphic novels, and they are also essential sci-fi-ish kind of reading. The Invisibles is what The Matrix is ripped off of,
Hmm.
and it's a really, really great graphic novel series. It's really cyberpunky, um, cool, um, mindfulness concepts, and then Transmet is that though very dark and like dystopian future, um, but like very hopeful within the darkness kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think overall, like at the end, Fringe, I don't know, but it was just interesting because Fringe was like a sci-fi show where they had the alternate universe.
Hmm.
And every time you got to visit the alternate universe, you found out like one thing about it. Like JFK lived and they have moon travel and like the Montreal Expos didn't fade away and Len Bias didn't have a drug overdose in 1986. Like the little things like that. And they had that was
Right.
funny because of the time the show came out in the alternate universe, everybody was carrying these tablets. I'm like, ooh, look at that high technology because there was like slightly technologically ahead of them. Now everybody has tablets, so it doesn't make a difference. But it's really
Yeah.
tough when it comes to TV shows. There's just so much stuff out there. It's
There's
hard
a
to
lot of
kind of
stuff.
sift through.
Yep, it's a golden age of entertainment. I spend so many hours a day trying to consume all of it just to keep up with it.
But are you entertained with arguing with people? It seems like you enjoy
Yes.
it to a point. So what's that all about?
I don't know if it's everyone says, "Oh, your patience is impressive." I don't know if it's really patience or an addictive personality, but like I really love debating people even when there are probably very small diminishing returns for normal human beings. I at minimum enjoy the practice of endlessly sharpening my abilities to try to communicate with someone where communication is continuing to fail. And I often find that when I'm persistently mindful and don't engage in their anger by becoming angry myself and escalating, that I can eventually get to a very interesting place with a lot of people. So I value it, and I think, as a philosopher, arguing with people who disagree with me is the most important thing I can do if I'm ever going to try to get smarter. There's no other way than there's no other, it's like any other game, right? There's no other way to get better at any sport or game or whatever than playing against an opponent who is fighting you hard on and hopefully is better than you, ideally.
So you're okay with the kind of theory of the one-on-one, not necessarily trying to convert somebody, but at least trying to understand somebody on that version as opposed to the trying to get all the people you disagree with to change their minds.
I mean, top down, bottom up. I'm an all of the above kind of guy. I am trying to build a platform so that I can reach out to more people and express my perspectives if they are helpful to as many people as I can. At the same time, I always believe in think globally, act locally. So I'm always willing to have a one-on-one conversation, and if I can convert one mind and one heart, then that person is able to go out and convert another mind and another heart, and it like either way, we're here for all of eternity. It seems like trying to help everyone become enlightened. So do whatever works and try to help as many people as you can, and it's just going to keep happening over and over again anyway.
So was it a Facebook page that got you in touch with your ex edgelord character, the one you had on episode 22? I think you called him Abe. I don't know if that's his real name, but it's up to you.
Yeah, no, I started up a argument group because as you were curious, I am obsessed with arguing. And the way the story of this group goes is there was an individual who's very far right who was introduced to me on Facebook during the election, and he and I got into some very long debates on my Facebook page that like horrified everyone around us and like sent normal human beings scattering away from my page as fast as possible. So, in order to contain these debates, I created what was called Monster Island, where individuals who were comfortable observing the most horrifying debates about human nature and morality that you could possibly imagine, you know, people who were like, the Civil War wasn't about slavery and, you know, trans people aren't whatever they say they are, it's lying, et cetera, et cetera. Like, we created a space for that was separate from where other human beings were. And in that space, there's been a lot of really terrible discussion, but also some really useful, fruitful discussion. And in the process of that, I've met a lot of really interesting people, including Abe, who was on the show. And it's been an interesting social experiment in seeing how it's an environment where there's no regulations. I don't enforce any of the rules whatsoever, pretty much. So it allows for people to really say exactly whatever they want to say, and that creates an interesting environment.
When you start those kind of groups where you want to have discussions, does it still turn one-sided because of where you are, or were you able to actually get a pretty good balance?
It's very hard. It's been the hugest problem. Even like I pulled in a bunch of people from both sides at the beginning and have consistently tried to pull in people from both sides. It does slant a little left consistently, a little more than a little. And I like whenever I talk about it on the show and it brings another couple of liberals to the show, that makes it even worse because unfortunately, plead as I might, the conservatives within the group have trouble recruiting further conservatives who will stick around. Truthfully, if I'm being totally honest, in my experience, it's harder to find conservatives who are willing to stick with debates and not flame out in various kinds of ways, and that's been challenging. But I try to keep it mixed. I really do. Like I'm always like, if you have any fans on your show who are conservatives, let me plead with them right now. The Facebook group is called Monster Island. Please answer all of the three questions or whatever that say make it clear for me that you're not a bot by answering, you know, what is morality real, stuff like that. Answer it in any way that a bot wouldn't be able to answer it, and I'll invite you immediately, and you can debate with
questions
liberals.
3.
Right, answer me these questions 3. And like we need more conservatives because I genuinely built that space because I want to hear beliefs that are different than mine because it is harmful when you don't hear beliefs that are different from your own. It's not healthy.
Yeah, sometimes it gets tough because you hear other people talk and you can tell they're getting their points from somewhere else, and they're getting them from some like conservative site like National Review kind of thing, and you're just repeating stuff, and then you think, what am I repeating that I hear? And I bet there's a lot of that going on. But
yeah,
let's get really controversial and get you in trouble here. Well, this won't get you in trouble because you already done this. So what was the deal with you, Thomas Smith, and the musical Hamilton? And maybe you could tell. I think you told your Hamilton story before, or maybe you already told it. It's been an hour. I forget things.
No, I haven't. On your show, Thomas and I are really good friends, and he's a great guy, and he's been super supportive in our show. and I love chatting with him. And so to have him on our show for the first time, we picked something where the stakes were very, very low for us to argue about. But like in the course of interacting and like online, we found out that he really doesn't like Hamilton, and I really did and do. So we had a debate about, whether Hamilton is a great musical or not. He prefers Sondheim. He prefers things that are more melodiously complex. I prefer anything that is really interesting, whether or not it's complex in melody or in lyrics. That's just a difference in taste. I totally respect his preferences, and I'm sure he respects mine. And at the same time, it was quite a lot of fun to mess with him on that one. And I will continue forever to mess with him on that one.
So I was like, who won? Someone had to win, right?
Who won is I'm on Team Hamilton, and I'm here discussing this with you. So obviously I won, and he lost, and you'd have to have him on your show to convince you otherwise.
So we'll have to, get him on to get the other side of the story, as they say.
I'm just saying, teach the controversy.
So you're doing, you actually have this thing called Patreons, like you have a bunch of them, and you're doing a book review series. What was the first one, and what's that all about?
Oh, we're doing like a long form book review series where we're doing like a chapter for like bonus content for our patrons. If you want to check us out, we're over at Embrace the Void on patreon.com. And what we're doing is we're going through a book called Superintelligence, which is about excuse me, I'm sorry. Like I said, I'm still fighting off a cold a little bit, so I'm fading a bit here.
More rum will help.
I could use a rum break if that's at all possible here. But to continue my plug, we're doing a show. We're doing bonus content about artificial intelligence and how it's going to develop and how it will achieve eventually superintelligence and allow us to, achieve vast new levels of intelligence, assuming that we don't kill ourselves off with that superintelligence. So it's been an interesting working through of a book that like lays out the various paths to super intelligent AIs, what they might look like, and we'll see eventually what techniques they suggest for controlling those AIs, preventing them from hurting individuals.
Well, we are getting close to the end of the hour, and that's when it gets time for the self plug. And it's not that kind of show, but so for your show, you've done pretty well with Patreons, but are you thoroughly monetizing this show? Do you have T-shirts coming up that feature Bitey the Void Crab?
Yeah, we do need Bitey the Void Crab T-shirts. We will absolutely at some point have T-shirts. That is inevitable, as Un would say. So because of the weird Patreon kerfuffle, we're gonna retool our Patreon goals. We're probably gonna switch to a monthly Patreon and go to weekly, and then probably put in some Patreon goals that have to do with a little bit of Void swag, because I think we're headed in that way really here soon, and then we will sell out. I think the inevitable goal is to find a corporate overlord like Casper or one of those other groups, and then start creating Void style commercials about slipping into the endless sleep that one can feel on Casper mattresses. I'm sure it'll all right itself when the time comes.
So what's the deal with your dislike of vegetables?
Oh, since I was very, very young, I'm not making this up, I have had an aversion to eating vegetables. I gag. I have a very strong gag reflex from it. It's some sort of super taster kind of situation. But when I try to eat a vegetable, I throw up. And so I avoid trying to do that because most people don't like it when you throw up at the dinner table. So it's my cross to bear, if I can steal a phrase.
Well, since we did
it's
not
unfortunate. I'd rather eat them.
Since we didn't get GW in here, maybe I'll get him and do a solo show and he can talk all about you. But I did want to include his out of context quote.
Yeah.
Everyone's cornflakes are getting peed in. That was a good one.
That's a good one. That's a good GW quote. Yeah, you should get him on here for his own show.
Listen to the first two episodes. I'll tell you why you should listen to the first two episodes of Embrace the Void, because they kind of interview each other. And see, I do like a football show, and I have a co-host. We've never done that, and I think we should. A little interview each other, get to know each other, let the audience know what they're in for, and they can really decide if they want to, clamp on or not. But since we have reached just about the hour, where can people find Embrace the Void and get ready for that, T-shirt when the day comes?
We're on all your standard podcatchers, so iTunes, Stitcher, whatever. We have a website, voidpod.com. We are at voidpod, on Twitter, we're at ETVpod, and I am very, very active on Twitter, as you've become aware. I enjoy interacting with people on there, so definitely come chat with us and hit us up on Patreon at Embrace the Void if you like the show.
Void Pod. See, that works. And if you want to hear me, I was on the Brainstorm podcast. I did have a few beverages before, but it was an interesting conversation. That was last Friday.
Whatever. I got drunk on Brainstorm too.
Yeah. Well, it's these podcasts that start. I mean, it was like 9:30, but yeah, I took one of my very strong bombers on the show. And I had been checking with Corey, and at the last minute, Corey's like, I'm not going to be there. So we had one of those like, hey, we've never talked to each other, so let's just talk about random crap for an hour, which, hey, that's podcasting, baby. That's how it goes. It gets glamorous, as they say. And there's a rumor that I will be on Inciting Incident. Was going to record this week, didn't work out. So I think we're going to do it next week. So I'm ready and going to see how that goes. But we'll be with other people. Luckily, thanks to our Facebook group, I found a good group of people. Might try to do another roundtable next week, but I have a guest lined up for this weekend. Might just get it out of the way, especially holiday time. It seems a little tougher to get people on shows. Now, if you want to support this show, be like Bobby, Hugh, Toyota, and Marissa, go to patreon.com/Zachrilege, ZACHRILEGE. I had 2 beers. I can spell it, so can you. Follow me on Twitter at Zachrilege. Like the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook. Send all love mail. And if you have ideas of guests you might want to have on this show, reach out to me at zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. So thank you to Aaron for being on tonight. GW, wherever you are, we love you. So for the listeners, stay safe. If you need to chat, I'm available. If you're an atheist and feel alone, you're not alone. Reach out. Let's chat and get that human connectiveness that keeps people coming back every Sunday. Stay skeptical. I love you all. I'm out of beer, so that means good night.